Well, welcome everybody to the latest in our series of Try This Planning groups. It's me this time rather than Tim because Tim has been unwell, but I'll do my very best to share what Tim has taught me about this key with you. It's great to have you back. Thanks, John and Elaine. It's lovely to see you. Um, these are fun, aren't they? They're a really nice way to dip into the book and learn about the keys. And before we start, because we've got buckets of time today, because this is a really short key, have either of you been playing around with anything from the book since we last met? I'd love to hear about it, even if it's not the particular keys in question. So tell us about that, Elaine.
I've actually been presenting these in workshops that I've been doing. And
Okay,
in fact, there was one I did recently where a good number of the participants have already had our usual intro uh, workshop. And so they wanted something different. And so I planned the whole thing around the keys and I presented, I think, four different ones, kind of a
great.
smattering of different ones, and demonstrating how they can be used to begin a lesson. And then I had them. So then let me think. Then I had them think about how they might begin depending on what the goals of a lesson was. So it went really really well. And I what I realized was that these keys, in some ways, there were teachers who were new to Mantle the Expert, and I my tendency is not to start with this, but to start with talking about Mantle the Expert. But I think for some people, it was a very practical and accessible way to begin. So without having to think about the whole mantle, you know.
Oh, I'm so pleased to hear that, Elaine. That's exactly what we had in mind when we pulled it together. So, and if anybody's watching this and is wondering whether it's okay to offer workshops to other people and share these resources, absolutely, that's what we're all about. So yeah, we're thrilled that you've been doing that. That's really fantastic. Thanks, Elaine. Did any of them strike you as particularly good for people starting out? Any particular keys, or was it just the kind of
I intentionally chose ones that were a little bit, uh, simpler.
sure?
Uh, the one where you might start with an image,
Yeah.
or with just text with words.
Fantastic.
Um, and, uh, I think ones where it was a little bit less interaction, even though I did use one where it was the fairy tale problem solvers, which I just thought is so brilliant. You kind of have to, I can't help not do it. I demonstrated also the first one. So some of them were directly from the book, and I definitely credit both you and Tim
Thank
and
you.
promote the book when I do it. And then some of them are from my own curriculum where I've used it. But I did intentionally choose ones that were a little bit easier to start with.
Great. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad I asked because it's great to hear that. And John, were you nodding as well when I'd asked you? Yeah. So tell us what
Yeah.
you've been up to with
Well,
the.
I've used the material, I think, in a kind of hovering around me way,
Yeah.
and so I've referred to it rather than delivered a session using it in the way I think that you were just saying a moment ago, Lane. That if I've got that right, the way you've
Mm.
used that. So for me, I really agree that for people who are sort of setting off, there is an ease with each of the keys, and it's very clearly set out for people. And I think you can select in the way
Mm.
that you want to. Um, and so rather than me using uh, one key in the way that you're suggesting, I have them floating around me. So it'll be interesting this evening thinking about the starter story one. But I have been stepping into history,
Mm.
and I
Tell us about
continue
that.
to step into history with some work I'm doing in Doncaster at the moment, on Alfred the Great, bless his cotton socks. and and the Egyptians, just like a really small
The
area.
Egyptians,
Yeah,
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 like a really small period
yeah,
of
yeah.
time.
So using that notion of stepping in is one that I've been right in the middle of. And the good thing about it for me is I can kind of pinch bits from you. Thank you very, very much. And I've found that they do sit alongside some of my practice and extend my practice. So thank you.
Oh, well, that's just really great to hear. I know that when Tim views this, it'll perk him up no end to hear that you're finding it so useful. And because both of you work with other teachers, it's like the word's getting out to more as well. So that's fantastic. Okay. Well, yeah, I can relate to what you're saying there, John, about how they sort of float around in your mindset. And I have, over the last couple of months that I've been accompanying Term as he's been teaching, I've been observing teachers reach out and pull them into their practice. So I've been able to, with the permission of this teacher, I've got an example of Step into History which I've seen, because as usual we're going to do this. We're going to have a quick reflection on key number 4, and then we're going to look at key number 5, which is start a story. So just to quickly talk about this one. Sorry, our image of the ship is a little bit obscured there on the side, but I was in a classroom in Salford just the other week, and the teacher there sort of, yeah, like you, I think, John, has got them floating around. So you can see they started with kind of creating an image together. So it was draw an image, but it was created with bits of tape and paper and pen to co-construct a sort of Viking ship burial. Then introducing a kind of a sound to help us step into the moment, and then it was kind of step into history, used as a sort of a third key to bring students in, because it's one thing to create it, it's another thing to step into it, isn't it? And I could really see how those keys could flow together. And yeah, it's a really nice example. I think you can see the little dragon at the front of the bow of the ship there. Um, and there was an element of Mantle of the Expert in this one as well, because the students were archaeologists investigating. So they did that beautiful thing of using certain keys to build the world, and then another key to step into the world that they'd built. So they built this burial, and then they're the archaeologists investigating it. So it's kind of beautiful, isn't it? So that example is up on the website. I think we've heard from you about the kinds of things you've been doing, or did you have more to add about how you've been using them?
I think the conundrum for me is, which is solved when you think about frame distance, the different
Yeah,
ways you can step in, is always, are you the most direct, as in terms of being the people, like in this case,
yeah,
the people who would be the Vikings themselves
yeah,
during the ship, or if you're the expert archaeologist or some other uh, witness to what's happening.
yeah.
And I think that's always still somewhat tricky, and what's okay, what's not okay. I think it's largely personal for each teacher. It might be different, but I know for me, I still struggle with it.
It's an ongoing thing for me too, Elaine, and I remember, I don't have the key here in front of me, but I remember one of the steps of this key says, if you're stepping into, if you're thinking of stepping into a moment and the people who are present are real historical figures, maybe consider being someone else entirely. And I kind of tend to do that. I
Mm-hmm.
tend to do that distancing, because there is a sensitivity to that, particularly in Aotearoa and New Zealand, and in contexts where people might be historical figures. They might have been dead for thousands of years, like Egyptians, and they're still real people, and their stories are sovereign to them. So it's something to be really mindful of. And I think on the whole, stepping in, when we step into history, if I remember the key correctly, um, we think about the things that the sounds and the silence and the things that might have been happening there, rather than presuming to put words into people's mouths or take on their actions. So I think yeah, that one of the things I like about the key is that a degree of that safety that we've all been searching for is baked in, or at
Mhm.
least a little bit of guidance. I hope you're finding that. Yeah. Yeah, but I hear you. It's probably the main thing that keeps me awake at night as well. And yeah, we'll talk about it further, I think. We'll keep talking about it. So is
Can
there
I
anything else to say about the stepping into history one? John, did you want to?
yeah, just to say I find the notion of distancing very helpful, um,
Mm,
for similar reasons to the ones we've just been expressing, but theatrically
yeah,
helpful as
yeah,
well, because you can assume a certain role that may or may not exist in history, and you can refer from a distance, to something that, as far as we know, is true, and in a way that anything can be true from the way people look at history.
accurate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
accurate.
yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah.
So, with me, Alfred the Great. I'm just about, with a bit of luck, to step into a moment with his eldest daughter, who becomes the Queen of Mercia. But she ain't going to be there. But her advisors are going to be there,
Nice.
and her great Lord Chamberlain is going to be there to talk to, not to King Alfred because he's dead and lying there there'll be a cloth on the ground, but his advisors and mourners will be there, and they will exchange recommendations about what his eldest daughter should do to follow some of the things that Alfred set up, and to ignore some of the things that Alfred set up as well. So distancing, I think, is
Yeah,
really a useful
yeah.
strategy.
That sounds great. And my gut feeling, I mean, my gut might be different from someone else's, is that in a context of English history, that being the advisors to the king is sufficient distances. It feels good. It feels fruitful. Um, yeah, wonderful. I hope you'll share with us how that goes. And just as you were talking to me then, I thought this is another advantage of this, is that in history we tend to get history presented to us in these huge themes like the Egyptians, the Tudors. And what this does is ask you, it kind of enables you, I was going to say force, but that's a horrid word. It enables you to zoom in on one moment, to remember that history is moments, and to step into one moment as an entry point to all of those. And that I think is something that drama can do well for us. So yeah, I love this key. We've got another one, I think, next time, called Step into a Moment, which is different. But yeah, step into history is one I have used over and over and over again. So great to hear these examples. Thanks. Well, let's move on and hear about the one that is our focus for tonight. And it's actually part of the Step into History key. There's a step into history, which involves this key, number 5, which is start a story. And of all the keys in the book, start a story key number 5 is probably the one that we use the most, because although we've called it start a story, if there had been more space, or if we weren't trying to go for 3-word titles, we might have called it start a story or keep one going, because you can, it's the best way I know to link the different keys together to form a sequence, and it's really just an extended form of the storyteller voice, the narrator voice. So simple but great. And so what I thought I'd do, is, because it's quite short, it's quite discreet, what I thought I'd do is take you through the UK example that's in the book, and then together we might tease out the features of the story here, and that will help us work out how we write effective ones. It's kind of all in the book, but it's nice to talk it through as well. So how about I just read you the example as it's written in the book? I might read it a couple of times because we would do that in the classroom too. Um, it's a skill, isn't it, listening? And this example, yeah, it suggests that we're right at the start of a drama. There's nothing in place. There's no imagined world, and we're starting off. But as I say, it can be used in all different ways. So this I'm reading this from my phone, by the way, because I didn't bring the book with me to England. Too heavy. So this one just says, if you can imagine you're the class of children, the teacher just says something like, well, I'm going to read you the start of a story. See what you think. Imagine you are falling through the air. All around you are clouds rushing by, and the wind whistles in your ears. Suddenly, in a blaze of light, you break through into a clear blue sky and see far below the outline of an island. Sea laps at its shores, smoke puffs from a grumbling volcano. A forest covers everything in thick green foliage. This is your destination. You pull hard at the handle gripped in your hand. There's a sharp tug and you slow down. Looking up, you see a wide silk canopy of a parachute opening above you. Higher still, invisible among the clouds, is an aircraft. You can hear its engines buzz as it banks and flies off into the distance. You look down again. The island is growing closer now, and you begin to scan the shore, looking for a tiny strip of sand that will act as a landing place. You spot one. Adjusting the cords that control your descent, you turn in a slow arc and fly towards your destination. Just before you land, as the beach rushes up to meet you, you pull hard again on the cords and the parachute contracts, allowing you to glide gently onto the beach. You look up again, and all around you are the descending figures of your comrades, those other members of your team who have also come here to explore the dark interior of this strange and unknown island. It's quite a long one. Oh, you gave me a little round of applause there. Tell me about that, John. Tell me about
Oh,
that.
well, it just, well, right from See What You Think, which wasn't part of the reading, which I think is a lovely giving permission for me to think what I want to think. So I thunk what I wanted to thunk. And I thunked coming down in the parachute, and I thunked pulling the cord, and I thunked changing direction, and I thunked looking up. I heard the buzz of the aircraft disappearing. And I very much enjoyed the storyteller's voice that you have, and the way you use your eyes inside that, where you look, and all
I
those.
defy anyone to read that without kind of doing a little bit of enactment. You really can't. I imagine that Tim would be doing a lot of enactment and things as he does it, but I know he will also be inviting children to mostly listen, right? And you've both read the book. You've both seen this example on the page, but isn't it different when it's given to you through the airwaves and then through your ears and the bones of your ears? Such a different experience, right?
I think that's the joy of storytelling. I don't think you can ever tire of having somebody tell you a story, and then for you to be a part of it. And I love this example, and I love, every time I read it, I get so excited. But just hearing the description and really visualizing it in front of me and myself in it it's really exciting.
And I think Tim's done a particularly good job of this little bit of writing, because with my example that I shared in the previous session, I really did need to read it twice. We didn't read it twice, but people were kind of grappling to understand it because it was descriptive, but it didn't have that action described to the same extent. Whereas I don't know what you think, but I kind of feel like we're down on the beach now. We don't really need to hear it again.
Yes.
It's something about the way that Tim's written this that gives us the information slowly and carefully. Did
And
you
just
feel like
lovely that we're not alone.
Yeah,
I was alone coming down, and then I
yeah,
went, oh, they're there.
they're there, my comrades.
We
Yeah,
are here.
interesting how he pops them in at the end. Eh? He makes it a solo journey first. So lots of riches in this story. So, you know, if we've answered this question really as teachers, we've responded to it as as humans, but also as people thinking about how that will work in a classroom. What if we imagine ourselves in the story for a minute, and I say, "What do you make of it?" Which is another lovely permission giving, see what you think and what do you make of it. What kind of things yeah, what do you make it? What did you make of it as fellow parachutists? What do you make
Well,
of what's around us and where we are, and what do you think?
I think it's an exciting adventure, but maybe dangerous. I mean, I see a lot of future in this, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're in this moment and it's really exciting, but there's a reason why we came here and it's unknown. And it sounds a bit wild, but definitely unknown territory. And so there's a lot to anticipate ahead.
Sure. So it could be something in this language, something in this place, something in the information is incomplete, so we're still wondering why we might be here.
Yeah.
And there's something here that's wild and rumbling and
Right. The
unknown and a sense
volcano.
of danger. Not only in the trip down, but what's here to meet us when we land.
Yep.
Good that we're not alone, John.
And this is now.
Mm.
Here I am in it. Here we are in
Yeah.
it, and there's hints of things that could be, as you said, Elaine, dangerous things.
Mm.
Always exciting to be in a bit of danger. But I've got my mates with me.
And we know there's a volcano. We did hear about that rumbling away, didn't we? Now, spoiler alert, we've got a slide that says Dinosaur Island on it here, but nobody mentioned dinosaurs yet, did they? So yeah, it's this sense of what Dorothy Heathcote called parsimony, holding on to quite a lot, and to giving just enough to kind of sow that sense of what might be to come. So the rest of the key involves, quite a lot of that speculative discussion, and really trying to follow those quadrants we talk about in the teacher compass, so that we especially in this example, which is not a historical example. If you look at the New Zealand video that we recorded, we actually started a story of a real, based around anyway, a real historical event. So different kind of way of behaving. If we're starting a story where we're creating and co-constructing this world together, there's a different kind of freedom in that. So keeping it speculative. Oh, I see what you mean. Oh, yes, I wonder if that volcano might be about to erupt. I wonder what's down here waiting for us. Yeah, I wonder what we brought in our backpacks. All of those things. And with a large group of young people, you're going to get lots of co-construction offers, aren't you, from the room. And so Tim suggests things like saying, "Well, could you tell me some more about that? Could you say some more about that? Why you feel there could be danger down here?" And so we're getting children inferring, building their vocabulary, and so on. And then the final step of the key is to follow up with some kind of activity that allows the students to co-create the story and become more involved with the narrative. And of course, the best way is probably to follow up with another key. So I can imagine us co-creating the setting with create a place, drawing a drawing together, encountering someone. Yeah. So it's a little bit loose, that step 5, follow up with an activity. It could simply be a writing activity. I've just recorded a short interview with a teacher who simply did that. She used the New Zealand example out of the book, and then she invited the students to write as if they were writing their journal for that same night as someone from the adventurer team. And the writing that she got was very marvelous, and she just did that as a standalone activity. So obviously this key on its own, you can't tell a delicious story, drag people into a world, and then go, righto, well, that was fun. It's got to go somewhere. But that's why we call it starter story. And the key does invite you to do something to kind of culminate that. But as I say, it can also lead to other keys. Okay, so let's tease out what it is that makes that story so successful. Now, both of you have been reading the book, so you're probably aware of the backstage machinations. But what did you notice was happening? What did that story present, and what did it not do? If you know what I mean. Talk to me, Elaine. You're nodding away there.
Yes. Um, when I first this was kind of a go-to key for me when I first started doing lessons more regularly, and I would start with a narration, which is a
Mm-hmm.
story, and I realized the difference between what I just experienced now and hearing this and what I was doing in the past was I would describe a setting and it would help give a context for whatever would happen next. But it was static. It
Mm.
was hearing a description and maybe it would help students visualize. But this was so open. There was so much open endedness about it and what the possibilities could be and mystery. And I think
Sure.
that is what makes it really exciting because it's not the end of the story. Like you don't just give the description and say, okay, well, now we're done with that. Like you said, now we're done with that. Now let's move on to the next part where you encounter some, right? There's the description itself. I mean, that's the whole point of story, as opposed to it's not start a description. The story is going to move and
That's
have characters and a problem and other, tension in it. And
sure.
that is what I appreciate about it.
I like what you just said there. So you talked about how a narrative, and in fact your own narratives tended to in the past be descriptive of location,
Mm-hmm.
but a little bit static. And what you like about this is the open-endedness, which you've noticed comes through that sense of mystery, or what we tend to call tension. So what we're noticing is, because there's still location here, right? There's still a setting, but what we've got is, as well as a description of the setting, we've got a lot of action, we've got a lot of things happening, right? And
Yeah.
we've also got this sense of, that's what the open-endedness comes from, that sense of tension, doesn't it? Of possibility of of yeah, I think that's what's giving us the open-endedness, and also the quality of show not tell. So we know this parachutist is terrified, or not terrified. What do we infer that this parachutist might be feeling as they descend? Excitement, perhaps. There's quite a lot of
Anticipation.
emotion there, but it's never stated. We don't go, your heart's in your mouth and you're terrified. You think you might die. You feel lonely for a moment, but then none of that. It's the far more aesthetically kind of grand thing of show not tell. And I'm not saying your writing used to be like that at all, Elaine. But it is a thing we can get into, and it's perhaps one of the most powerful things we can teach students to do, or model to students, is that show not tell. So I think the qualities that you're appreciating are location, tension, action, and show not tell, isn't it? That's what's giving that quality.
And
Great.
that no, it's again just giving enough for the moment. There's
Yeah.
no past or future yet, right? We don't know who these people are, where they came from, or why they're there, and we don't know
Nice.
what they're going to do next. So it's really suspended, so to speak, in
Yeah.
in this moment.
What you've just said there is so astute, because I've noticed when I'm teaching teachers to write in this way, to write these narratives, it doesn't say this in the book, but I think it's worth stating. This is like an establishing shot almost in a movie. And so this one does have a lot of action in it. We've come from a plane, but we are mostly kind of held, as you say, suspended, literally, in this one. What we don't, what when we say that we want some action, we don't want sort of suddenly a dinosaur lumbers into view. that's coming. So this is like that opening shot in a movie which sweeps around the scene, and there may be some rumblings from a volcano. There may be, it really is, but it's not a whole lot of things happening. Isn't that interesting? It's both full of action and not a whole lot of story happening yet. It's establishing it. It's fascinating.
And that's why it's got. Sorry, was I interrupting?
No,
Uh,
you're next. Go.
that's why it's got a very open and powerful starting point, and it's a helicopter view, isn't it? That kind of feel of being able to see all
Yeah.
sorts of things on the way down that you might just see and then forget, but later on remember that there was a cliff with a waterfall
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the other thought I had there was that for this business of setting the location, and then that if you're not careful, a dinosaur rumbles into view, and you've got everybody rolling on the ground. That particular tension.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and here, for somebody who doesn't want, well, there will be people who can manage that. There'll be lots of people who will be able to have a dinosaur here and there, or a bone that will give a clue, or whatever. Um, but there'll also be people who go, I'll go that far and I won't go any further for the moment. And I thought what you were saying about, at the end there, you might do some writing of the moment of, it's a what if writing, or perhaps what might happen is, and a chance there for everybody to put some narrative lines in that you can then look at together and choose, or do bits of, or put bits in the future, or put bits in the history of this island. And I think that's quite powerful to go have a really good helicopter view, and then over to you to invent. But if you hear dinosaur noises, hold it right there a moment.
Yeah.
If that's if that's where you are in your
Yeah.
comfort teaching zone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally hear you. You can keep it out of body and rumpus and
Yes.
for as long as you need to.
I
Yeah.
like a bit of rumpus. I mean,
I like a bit of rumpus
I
too.
think it's really important to rump,
But there
but
are
not everybody
teachers for
does.
whom,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and probably even we all we might like a bit of rumpus, but we do also want the aesthetic, and we want to be able to slow it down, and we'd like that rumpus to be carefully informed, inquiry-led rumpus rather than first response rumpus. So, the beauty of having drawings, having writing, is that they're different modes of meaning making, and so they can, moving between the symbolic, which is what this one is, the spoken word, to the iconic, which would be the drawings, to the enacted, back to the iconic or the symbolic. That gives a lesson a sense of beautiful flow, doesn't it? And that's something to really bear in mind when you're linking up your keys as well, is to vary those. So much in this, isn't there? All
I
right,
think,
so
can
yes,
I,
of course,
sorry,
Elaine, keep
say
going.
one thing? You mentioned the word inquiry, and I think that's the key to the keys in a way, because that's what this has. You're not giving it all away all at once. And so even with the setting itself, forget the rest of the story.
Hmm.
Um, you know, you're just giving enough to like have a small picture, and then the picture gets a little bit bigger and you get more pieces of the picture, but it's still students putting it together
Fully.
and trying to figure out what's going on around them and
Mm,
where they are. And so I feel like it builds the inquiry and the curiosity.
for sure. Yeah, and
So that's
really,
all I
as
want.
you've been talking, I've been thinking like the main thing. Well, no, so many main things. One of the main things I've noticed on this trip with Tim is how everything is an inquiry. Even how are we going to behave here is an
Mhm.
inquiry. Literally everything that goes on in the classroom is something that teachers and students figure out together. And wonder about together. And yeah, this just sows the seed so beautifully for it, doesn't it? Um, and I'm willing to bet that even though this is called Dinosaur Island, if something else came up with those students that was more compelling or more of a draw, it would become a different kind of island if that was right for Tim. So freedom and possibility and inquiry led. So we've talked about what's in that writing. There's location, there's that sense of tension, there's that sense of showing, not telling. Did you spot any other features, any other information that writing gave us that was important? So let me read a bit. All around you are clouds rushing by, and the wind whistles in your ears. Suddenly, in a blaze of light, you break through into a clear blue sky. What have we got there?
Sound, silence, stillness, light.
There we go. We got those six
Matrix, the
dimensions,
matrix.
right? So for those watching who aren't familiar with this yet, and these two are going, yeah, no, we know, we've got this. We've so got this. What's also clever about this is that it's giving, I'll show you the next slide because I kind of put this on the next slide. It's giving, this short narrative is giving what we need for our context. So in the book, we've given you a visual for context. So context just means the imagined world that we're going into, right? And any imagined world needs these six things for us to understand it. It needs characters, location, events, time, tension, and focus. You could change that to characters, who we are, the W's, who we are, where we are, what's going on, when is it, what's up, and what's the main point. And I think I'm right in saying that all of those are present in this piece of writing. We've got characters, we've got the parachutists. We get the sense that they're investigators of some kind. We're here to explore the interior of this strange island. We've got a location, we've got some events, we've got a sense of time. As you say, John, we're in now time, but I've also got a sense that this is present day, haven't you? If there's a plane banking away, I'm going to expect to be able to reach in my backpack and get out modern communication equipment and that kind of thing. Put it this way, if the teacher wants to suggest that it's sometime in the past, they're going to need to put the hint. They're going to need to show that it, or tell that, but probably show that somewhere in the description, in the narrative. We've got some tension. Ooh, will I land safely? And there's all this rumbling on the island. And we've got that focus of, which for this section was about getting down safely. And as you say, kind of the helicopter view is really kind of the point. The main point is the helicopter view of the scene. So if you're planning for this key with a different context, you need to make sure that your narrative has all those elements in it. So, if we were to go with your King Alfred example, what would be those things? What would be your characters? You've got the advisors, you said, the king's advisors. You decided you have got the daughter, but she's not going to be present in that moment, but she's in the context. Any other characters?
Well, the teacher that I'll be working with will be somebody who can listen to the Alfred's advice. So she will be in role with some of the class, and I will be in a listening role with some of the other children in the class who will be in role as the daughter's advisors. There will be a building, the location, because we're in the Witan, perhaps in London, which is the predecessor of Parliament.
Right. So we've got our location.
I shall build the location.
Right.
His dead body will be lying there.
Right. So we've got the king himself present as one of the characters, or the corpse.
What was good about the things he did that she can follow on with, what was not so good. And then there's a chance as well for me to challenge the good things.
Right. So that sounds like it's fulfilling all of these six things. And what I love about this, I don't know if you agree, but what I love about this six-sided figure, to me it's almost like a bit of a keyhole where we're going to peek through there into the imagined world, and we need all those things to be able to peep in. And it makes me think about the teaching, not in terms of what I'm going to do with the kids, but in terms of what is through that looking glass, you know, in the other side. So we've got the king, we've got the daughter, we've got the advisors, we've got possibly some passers-by, some we've got the location which you named for us there, but it's the predecessor. So we're in London, we've got events, we've got a meeting of advisors, and they're thinking back about some past events and perhaps planning for some future events. And all we suggest is that you actually jot these into the hexagon when you're planning, and when you're writing your narrative, you make sure that it introduces your context to the degree that you need it to, for children to avoid any confusion. Time is really important in this one. Have you got a date?
899 is when he died.
Right. When it's that long ago, especially if it's the first time we're going into the narrative, I will often simply state that the year is 898, you know, and perhaps set the location with a few, you know, specifics about what is and isn't around us. You know, Dorothy Heathcote used to do a technique with children where she would walk them back in time in this moment, you know, to a location. But often we can say, you know, before cell phones, before cars, before da, da, da. And that's really kind of settling that time aspect into them, so that the clothes that people are wearing are have been hand sewn from animals and fibers found within a 20-mile radius of this place. You know, that's showing, not telling. And then we've got that sense of tension. How will this meeting go? So yeah, and what's your focus? What's your main point for dropping into this moment and telling the story?
It's a commission.
Okay.
A commission between 2 Year 4 groups in 2 different primary schools.
And what about within, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, but within the imagined world, because you're still thinking about, what's the main point of going into this moment with this, if we were to do it with a story, what's the focus for the story? Do you see the difference between the focus for the classroom?
That's very helpful, yes.
Yeah.
So for the narrative kind of line, the business of being there in that time, obviously, and in that place, and there may be a moment when we dress, imagining, deciding the colours that we will wear in order to do that historical distancing. We're there because we know now that there's a tomb where Alfred the Great is buried. We don't know about his burial robe. We know that there's a tomb where Cleopatra VII for the other school was buried. We don't know what her burial robe was, but the commission then is going to be collect the things for the 2 schools in order that they can design and place the burial robe on the body. And they can then tell, 1 Year 4 group will be telling the other Year 4 group what are some of the things it might be useful to know about Egypt.
I love that as a focused commission. So this allows me beautifully to demonstrate what I mean by this element of focus, John, because you could tell a narrative to drop children into this moment. You could tell one narrative that focuses on the helicopter view, you know, so the focus is the setting. You could do a completely different, you would change it completely if your focus was on the burial robe that the king is wearing. It would change completely again if your purpose, if your focus for the telling the story was the tension between the 2 sets of advisors. Do you see how that focus aspect actually shifts what the narrative will be? So I was actually responsible for putting that 6th thing on. We used to have pentagram, and I said to Tim, I actually think that focus is really important. Like, what's our main thing? What's the main thing? I don't mean in the whole mental experience or in the whole unit of work, but in this story.
Yes.
what's the camera looking at the most, or what's the story focusing on? So I think that's a great example of how you could have the same characters, location, events, time, and tension, but if you shift the focus just a little bit, you will totally transform your narrative to a different one. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, and that's helpful. And you're talking earlier on about what's happening to us, the events, and then
Yeah.
shifting focus. My subtitle for the focus is, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
action are we going to take? So I shall be in consultation with the teachers in the two places about what actual focus they want. But quickly, if I may, one of the things that concerns me about working with topics
Yeah.
is being tied to the sticky knowledge.
Hmm.
So for me, working in drama, there's a freedom that I will jealously guard, which is why I've gone for the burial robe and I've gone into art and design, but relating to the sticky knowledge.
Hmm.
The teachers will be sticking their knowledge in with graphs on the wall, they'll be
Yeah.
reading bits and all that kind of background. I'm delighted to be freed from that.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Um,
So let's imagine that we were going to write. I know this is probably not how you're launching your drama with these children, but I'm imagining a classroom in which they're going to start an investigation of Alfred, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Using the starter story key, and I might write, if it was my classroom and it was the first time, I might write a narrative in which my focus is to establish how long ago this was. I might do that for my first one, but and as a result, I will write more about, what there isn't in the space and what things smell like and taste like, and my focus will be on that. Do you see what I mean? Someone else might say, "Oh no, well the children have got a really good sense of the time period. What I need to do here is focus on the tension between the two parties and what will happen today, what will or that I might focus on the grief of the king's advisors." So they will be different stories, won't they?
can I ask a question?
Of course.
I think I'm getting a little confused now between focus and tension. I always think of tension as the problem, right?
Yeah.
What's the problem before
Yeah.
I
What's
start?
that? Yeah.
It sounds like focus kind of might be the same thing.
They could overlap, couldn't they? But I think it's like, well, for one thing, attention isn't always a negative. It isn't always a problem. Attention could be um, who will go up to get the award that we've won. That it's a problem, but it's a positive thing.
Right.
I think of focus as being like, what's the point? What are we looking at? What are we focused? I mean, that's why I use the word focus. What's and it's it I think there's enough of a different quality to it that it's
Mhm.
worth thinking about on its own. But I agree with you. Often the focus is going to be the point of tension. It is going to be the point of tension. However, for me, there's often about 12 points of tension in any scenario. So which one are we? Yeah.
So like for Dinosaur Island, the tension is getting down safely. The focus is what is this new place? I mean, just learning
Yeah.
about this new place.
Yeah. And you could express that as, the focus is to get the helicopter view of the
Right,
of
right.
the
Okay.
island. Yeah.
Okay.
So again, this is a heuristic, so it's to help you think. If you find that a useful question to ask yourself, just like, so what's our focus? And remember, this is for you as teacher. I don't really discuss this hexagon with students, to be honest. I might sometimes teach it to them as a writing tool, but I'm not going to sit there as we drop into Alfred's um setting going, well, our location is this and our focus is, it's more of a memory jog. Does that help, Elaine?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing that our little narrative, so just reminding us what we're doing here, we want to use the key where we start with a narrative. We'd love to produce a piece of narrative that's full of fruitful things like Tim's was. The advice is to make sure that your narrative covers those things, not by telling us, but by showing us. And it can be good to just write one and then go back and use this as a bit of a checklist. And then the other part that you both spotted beautifully is that there's some color. It says behind our pictures here, include some of these dimensions to add color to your narrative. And the 6 dimensions, as we're getting really accustomed to now, are those contrasts between light and dark, movement, stillness, sound, and silence. So Tim did that with his example with the whistling wind in the ears, the blaze of light, the dark interior of the strange island, the beach rushing up to meet you. Really, I think the more I learn to write with these 6 dimensions, the more richer my writing, I believe my writing becomes. And quite often what I'll do is I'll draft a bit and then I'll go, well, how can I do that through the 6 dimensions instead? So I might have said something like, you stick your legs out straight to brace against the sand. And then I think, oh, how can I do that more with a movement? Oh, the sand rushes up to meet you. It's just practice, really. Note that the advice in the book is that you don't necessarily need to make sure that your writing contains all of the 6 dimensions. They're all there available to you, but a flavor really. I can tend to be a little bit prescriptive when I'm doing the 6 dimensions. I go, okay, light, then darkness, because those are nice and contrasty. Oh, movement, then stillness. But of course, it's a palette, so you can dip in. And I think Tim's done a lovely example of that, dipping in. If you're using the starter story key to start an experience off, or to link 2 keys together, it's well worth preparing this. I can tell you that Tim still will sit the night before we're teaching and write a paragraph and craft that paragraph. I think it is quite exceptionally difficult to write a quality piece of writing like that on the hoof. It's not impossible, but it's worth doing. And then you're just saying to the children, listen, you might like to listen. What does it say? See what you think of this. I've got a story here that I'm going to read to you. Nothing wrong with having a piece of paper in your hand. So I think that makes it doable, doesn't it? This starter story key. Anything there that's new for you, or was this refreshing knowledge that you've picked up and used a few times already? Any new thoughts or take homes from what we've talked about here?
From me about that, the business of forgive me, got it now. The business of of being outside the action, then inside the action. By being outside, you can hear the buzzing of the aircraft. And if you want to be in a time where there's no such thing as mobile phones, that's okay, because the engine of the aircraft was buzzing. It wasn't, it could have been one of those biplanes that
Yes, that's true.
you just jumped.
However, I think if he wanted us to know that, he would need to
He would
give
have
us
built it
something
in.
else.
I'm just kind of
He would have
referring
needed
back.
he would have needed to give us the crackle of the radio, or I don't know quite what. Perhaps we can think of what, but something, your aviator's goggles that you were issued at the start of the war or something. I don't know. Yeah. So that idea of being outside and inside the action, that's a new nuance for you.
And a reminder as well of, you can, the 6 dimensions don't stand by themselves. They relate to each other. So you can be in darkness and hear movement. There's that lovely mixture of things that any good writer will rely on, and the children can operate that, or older students can operate that, can't they?
They totally can. And another nuance of the dimensions is that they can be literal or metaphorical. So you could have a darkness in your heart, or you could have your heart standing still, or you can have a rush of blood to your ears or something. So that can be, or there can be darkness in the atmosphere, and that can be fun. I remember going, oh right, I don't need to literally find some darkness, I can find some metaphorical darkness too. Huge fun to write with. All right, nice. Well, that's just about our time, actually, hasn't it? Sped by. Definitely invite you to use this key. It has loads of benefits. It's the best way I know of dropping them in and linking the key, dropping the students in and linking the keys together. It's also useful, like now, when you're out of time at the end of an experience and you really don't have time to do a whole sort of culminating activity. The wonder of story is you can bring a world to a close in just a few sentences, and over the next 100 years, the influence of this team's work was well known around the world. Awards were won, medal, Nobel prizes received, and the team looked back many years later as satisfied older people, decorated members of their society. There we are, we got there. That was a terrible story, but you get the idea. There is that lovely sense of ritual and aesthetic that you were talking about too, John. It's such a powerful, important part of the experience, and it engages children. It re-engages children. Sometimes when things are getting a bit loosey-goosey and rumpusy, we can feel like the only way to draw people back is to clap or shout or raise our voices or be very teacherly. If we can remember at that moment to reach for the storyteller voice or for the next part of the story that you're going to read, it's probably the strongest management tool there is. There are some limitations. It won't stand alone. You will need to use it along with other activities. As we've said, taking care with historical contents, as always. That's going to be a repeating theme. Historical context or cultural sacred stories. It does take a bit of practice to write these, but it does get easier with time. And it can be a little bit tricky, as mentioned. If a lot of times I think I've come out of the class and gone, oh, I so should have done that. I so should have done the start of story moment sooner than I did, or a different thing, because I go with my instinct to raise my voice. So there we go. So many links to literacy. I mean, this is a literacy key, and it in itself, it doesn't necessarily hold other curriculum areas, although, as someone pointed out this morning, it's an opportunity for you to use rich vocabulary from your historical period or your technical, your specific literacy language that you're going into, and to enrich the vocabulary and use some words that in their context the children will understand, but as a list they might not understand, but in their context, that's what beautiful stories do, isn't it? They enlarge vocabulary. So yeah, lots and lots of benefits, I think you'll agree. So I really hope you'll send me your Arthur story if you I said Arthur, Alfred story, if you end up writing it, or other ones you've ended up using. We've been gathering in teaching examples on the website, and there's an image here of some of the teaching examples of different keys, so do remember to keep sharing those with us, and come back next time for key number 6, which is step into a moment. I do hope you will, because I'm enjoying this so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much, both of you. I'm gonna pause the recording so we can say goodbye properly, but thanks very much for joining me tonight. That's been fantastic.
Thank you. Viv, do you have just